Doctor of Demons by Neon Sanketsu, Chapter 5. Long live the king. Sorry, but I'm done looking back. I'm shaking the past off. I'll prove it by surviving. I'll prove that's better this way. I'll prove that I'm not crazy, no matter how much humanity rejects me with their words, their deeds, their thoughts. I won't bend, no matter what they think, no matter how they threaten me. I'm not gonna falter. I'm not gonna shrink away in fear. I will persist. I will endure. That's what it means to live, demon or human. At the end of the day, we're all alive. Please don't push me. I don't want to be the bad guy, a king of demons. Long live the king. Do you understand now? Naruto truly, really, truly wished he didn't. Outwardly, he masked a frown by drinking more of Tamayo's tea. Inwardly, however, his mind began to race. There was another king. He wasn't quite sure why the knowledge rattled him so. It shouldn't have. He'd suspected such over the years, contemplating the possibility that someone else was running around creating demons, but there had never been any proof. Every demon he encountered seemed to loathe to speak of such, and he'd never had a name to lead with. Until now, Muzan Kibutsuji, he burned the name into his brain, committed to memory, even as he drank yet more tea. Taki squirmed restlessly beside him, no doubt sensing his anxiety. She'd always been sensitive to such. He patted her head, and she melted into his right side, clinging on for comfort. Yutaro muttered something angrily, and he set his cup down to sling an arm around the boy's shoulders in turn, drawing him close as well. The younger boy squawked and tried to resist, but his efforts were token at best. It's all right, he murmured for their sake as much as his. This doesn't change anything. Not a thing. Ducky dipped her head. Feels like it does. We're weak. He's strong. He can kill us. Naruto kissed her forehead, setting her sputtering. Nope. Gyutaro made a confused sound. No. Nope. He bobbed his head. I don't get it. You don't have to. Naruto hummed. He touches you, either of you, and he dies. Simple as that. They shivered a little, basking under the naked truth of his words. Tamaya had painted an unpleasant picture of Muzan and his associates. Upper moons, lower moons. Come to think of it, didn't Muzan used to have one of those etched into their eyes? Into her eye, so had Rui. Come to think of it, but that little brat was long since ashes. He'd have to ask her then. Scaredy cat or not, she was still family. She'd not gone astray the last few decades, and he somehow doubted that she would now. If this Muzan was so keen to walk in the sunlight, it might well put his family in grave danger. More than that, he'd be difficult to find. Anyone who could change their appearance was one thing, but their very aura, their emotions, this world was already brimming with so much of it. Time would be needed to ferret him out decades, if not more. Still, there was no need to panic. There were precautions he could yet take, preparations he was able to make. If Musan tried to find or feed upon any of his family, he'd be in for a nasty surprise. His blood was potent, almost literally so. Many had tried to join his family by force in the past. None had succeeded. Without his express permission, none could be turned. To the uninitiated, his blood was the most potent of poison. To those of the family, it was a drug, one they must take care not to grow addicted to. Blood aside, every one of his demons was strong. They would not die easily, and if any of them were in peril, he'd sense it. It's still better let the nine know, Kurama sighed. That one too. Naruto whined inwardly. Already, his family reconvened every 100 years for the great banquet. He'd endured one shortly before recruiting Taki and Gyutaro, and the less said about that fiasco, the better. The next was at least 7 decades away. Kasa would undoubtedly come if he called, but the rest were scattered across Japan and beyond. He knew where they were, of course, just as he knew the location of every demon he'd ever turned. One had gone overseas in search of adventure, another was eking out a humble existence in the countryside, a third had taken it upon themselves to teach others the way of the sword. As the others, well, the less said of them the better. They wouldn't hurt innocents per se, but they certainly wouldn't go out of their way to help either. News of this Muzan fellow might well change that, but until he gathered them, they wouldn't see any reason to change their ways. It was a simple thing to connect, to warn his brood about Muzan, about his 12 moons through his mental connection, and he did, but he wasn't sure how many would listen. More than one might actively see such an affront as a challenge and seek them out. Blast! He really would have to call them together, and soon. Just ask Shootin to whip up a bit of her special sake. Worked wonders last time. Sure, because drunk demons were easier to deal with than sober ones. Wouldn't do to destroy a mountain again. You should consider working with the Demon's Lair Corps. Tamayo's soothing tone drew him out of his thoughts. They might be able to help you track down Muzan. Silence stretched between the four of them. Naruto made an incredulous sound. The Slayers! Daki squirmed free and buried her fangs in a hiss. Like hell, why should we work with them? They'd put our heads on a pike the first chance they get. What she said? You stupid or something? Yutaro began to scratch the right side of his face in thinly veiled agitation. Teary bloody furrows there, tearing bloody furrows there that healed thrice as quickly. You are, right? You gotta be. The second they learn we can walk in the sun, bam! He slapped a hand down. Game over. We'll be public enemy number one. Tamaya weathered their scorn with the patience of an eternity. Her gaze sought his. Rather than answer, Naruto held out his empty cup. More tea, please. But of course, like the graceful hostess she was, the demoness refilled his earthen cup at length, wrapping both hands around it. Naruto raised his lips. From there, he closed his eyes and drank slowly, savoring the blend as much as the taste. Not a bad recipe. He'd have to ask for after he had to ask after it once they were done here. Setting the cup down, he exhaled softly and weighed his options, knowing full well what she wanted. She wasn't even trying to hide it in the least. Really, the choice was painfully obvious. I refuse. Tamara recoiled, looking like she'd been slapped. See, Ducky preened as she squirmed into his side. He agrees with us. Shove off, you old biddy. He raised a hand to silence her. Ducky, be nice. We're guests. Remember, disagreeing with her is no reason to be rude. But why? Tamayo leaned forward, a thin thread of agitation weaving itself into her words. We share a common enemy in Muzan. Why not work together to eradicate him? Because there would be a mass panic. He bit out the words, drawing another flinch from her. The second they realize me and mine are a different breed than Muzan, all hell will break loose. You exaggerate, surely. Tamayo touched a hand to her chin, looking somewhat alarmed by his claim. Surely the Ubayashaki clan would not take such drastic measures once they learned of your intent. When he crooked a brow at her, she proved quick to amend her statement. Muzan is a stain upon their name, a living curse upon them. They want to exorcise him from memory, nothing more. And when he dies, Naruto leaned forward with a smile. Every demon he ever created turns to ash. No, including you. Her face went ashen. How did you? How indeed? Is that exactly a quantum leap, Missy? And in his peripherals, he was keenly aware of Daki and Yutaro. They were looking at him again, coming to the same conclusion he had. He created those demons. His blood flows through their veins. If the creator dies, so does his creations. He heard the former gasp and knew she'd figured it out. The same thing might apply to me, of course. A clawed hand rose, veins pulsing in his hand. Huh, was that a tremor of anger just now? Or had he imagined that? Care to test it? Doctor gazed upon doctor. Demon glared against demon. Even with their instincts suppressed and blood modified, Tamaya was powerful, but he was no mere demon. If it came to any kind of fight, he'd win. Hands down. The same couldn't be said of the kids. Yutaro was already reaching for his sickles. Daki's obai twitched, ready to lash out at the slightest provocation. Naruto shook his head, and they stilled with baffled glare. They didn't understand. Tamayo would eat them alive. You didn't live this long without a trick or two up your sleeves, and he suspected she had more than a few. In that moment, Naruto made his decision. If Tamayo so much as twitched towards them, he would kill her. His fellow doctor saw the look in his eye and leaned back. I think not. I have no wish to die. Words, empty air, so much of it. She might not desire death against him, but she'd happily throw herself to the pyre if it meant the end of Muzan. There was a story there, something she'd not told him, a secret so black, a pain so poignant that she dared not think of it. Even now, instead, she'd stomped it down and buried it in the back of her mind. Why did she want Muzan dead? What had he done to her? How had she escaped him? It was a mystery, one he longed to unravel. Instead, he stilled his temper and offered an olive branch. All right, he said at length, watching her perk up. Can you say with complete certainty that the Slayers won't hunt us? He tilted his head just so and let his eyes glow in the low light. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the Slayers agreed to work with me. Unlikely as it may seem, he granted her a small, sad smile. We team up, find Muzan, and storm his hideout, slaughtering every demon in our path. It's a massacre. Good guys win, bad guys lose. Happy ending, right? Her expression suggested it wouldn't be. So tell me then, he prattled on, what's to stop the Slayers from turning their blades on me and mine the second Muzan dies? And do you have good relations with them? She looked away. The silence was her answer. Can you give me your guarantee? He leaned in, knowing she couldn't. Your word? Tamayo met his glare for a full 3 seconds. Then she looked away in shame. I cannot. Didn't think so. He steepled his fingers. That said, I don't want to kill every demon. There are monsters, sure, but there are also those who had no way in there that had no say in the matter. If possible, I'd like to turn them myself. The bad ones can rot for all I care. And he'd annihilate anyone who'd enjoyed the hurting innocence. But those who didn't have any say in the matter, those who have a choice, they deserve a second chance. Her lips pursed into a thin line. Still, she did not snap. That would take decades to accomplish, if not more. Perhaps, he allowed, but not likely. I've dealt with the moons before. Shouldn't be hard. Her attention fixated on him with a fitful intensity. Upper or lower? Naruto paused, looked back through his memory, and frowned. Lower, I think. He touched one hand to his eye. That rude kid had the mark. I remember seeing and being confused at the time. You've already killed a lower moon and converted another without even realizing it at the time, he chortled. Looking back, Mukago's fear made sense. She'd been terrified, caught between a rock and a hard place, between him and Muzan. Poor girl. She spooks easily, but she's really strong when you push her. Don't get me started on her blood demon art. She's all kinds of broken. Of course she was. She'd clawed her way up to fourth in 3 decades. Even Daki and Yutaro hadn't accomplished that, and he trained them directly. He'd need to give her a big hug when they get back. Maybe bring her some sweets too. Did she like fried tofu? No, that was the other one. One would argue that those turned by Musan made their choice. Tamayo interjected into his thoughts. She was quite adept at that, it seemed. You can't hope to save all of them. Not all, just most. He held firm, lifting his chin in defiance. My point stands. I won't annihilate an entire race just because their leader happens to be a bad person. Surely you do not intend to do such a thing alone. I have an army. I think I'll be fine. I see. Tamayo's hesitation said otherwise, but she seemed willing to humor him. And just how many demons do you have serving you? Kurma scoffed, as if we tell her that. Cut the crap. He snapped his fingers at her, cutting her off. You're 100 years too young to manipulate me. I am not trying to, but numbers or no, it doesn't change the fact that thing is inhuman. He could feel the anger seething in her words. You don't seem to understand. Her eyes flashed, slitted, regaining her cat-like pupils once more. Muzan is evil. There's no length he won't go to, no depths to which he won't sink to achieve his goals. Veins pulsed in her forehead as she snarled at him, giving him a glimpse of the wild woman she'd once been. He leads and he lies, uses and betrays. He acts the angel when he is the devil itself. Her hands balled into fists and claws biting into her palms to draw blood. You cannot reason with him. You cannot convince him. Any kindness you show him will only be a dagger in your back. Do not make the same mistake I did. Mistake, you say? Naruto jumped on it, eyes gleaming. And what mistake might that be? Tama trembled where she sat. I do not wish to speak of it. He wanted to push, he really truly did, and that this was his chance, a once in a lifetime opportunity to unravel the mystery of the woman before him. She had already probed him with all manner of questions. Wasn't he owed at least one? A proper leader would have pressed advantage, demanded she reveal her past, or in the absence of it, that he wouldn't trust her as an ally. If she refused, he'd be well within his rights to simply take Daki and Gyotaro and walk away right now. He had her and she knew it. You don't have to tell me anything. The news seemed to surprise him. I don't. Nah, he waved her down. You obviously have some history with Musan. Was he your husband or something? Husband! Tamayo surged to her feet, towering with her rage. You dare! He'd spoken the words in jest, a playful jab ought to lighten the shroud of sorrow hanging over her. As such, he wasn't wholly prepared for the sudden surge of hate. He felt it in the index in he the hate he felt in the surge of hate he felt in the express in the moment. It boiled out of Tamayo in a relentless tide, drowning the gentle facade she'd worked so hard to create. Her claws swiped out, annihilating a nearby wall. Daki and Yutaro flinched as and ducked, and debris sprayed forth. Naruto remained seated, not batting an eye, even as she surged forward. Say that again, and I'll bite out your heart. Her hand snapped out, seizing him by the collar. She thrust her face against his, forehead to forehead, fang buried eyes glowing with rage. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with lavender filled the air, not an unpleasant aroma by any means. Her lips hovered an inch from his, and for a moment he wondered if she would attack him. She'd held herself back for so long, buried her true nature. Now it came roaring back to the fore. My mistake. Her ire was genuine, if nothing else. So, not in love with Muzan then? No, never. She leaned back and spat at his feet. I'd sooner shag a slug. Fair enough, he shrugged. I apologize. Her words, her vehemence, stuck with him. Shag a slug. That was an unlovely image. Naruto felt his lips twitch. He couldn't quite hide the snort that followed. He could have killed her a dozen different ways, and he could have killed her different ways. Instead, he found her sudden spark fascinating. When was the last time someone threatened him with such a creative means of violence? I think I might like you. It bled the anger from her like a broken sieve. You're definitely different from most demons I've met. Ducky made angry ducky noises in the background. Oh, come on! Then allow me to clear up the misconception. Tamayo seemed to shrink in on herself for a moment, then rallied once more. It's ironic, really. A peal of bitter laughter fled from her lips as she hung her head. You're so proud of your family. Her head rose again, and now it was his turn to flinch at what he saw there. You love them, don't you? Pain, misery, regret, so much regret. It nearly closed his throat. You do anything for them, to be there for them. I do. He firmed his heart and sat a little straighter, trying to ignore the police sound Doc he made. And I would. There were no lengths he wouldn't go for his family. Would a father not defend his children? Would a husband not protect his family? It went without saying, he'd happily lay down his life if it came down to that. But at the end of the day, immortality had made him somewhat selfish. He wanted to help others, sure, but he wanted his family to prosper and thrive too. Most fathers can't destroy mountains. Semantics. I had a family once too. The veins in her visage receded. The demon she was giving away to the sorrowful woman she'd become. I was a married woman. A gentle, forlorn look bled across her pale face. A child. I had children, a boy and a girl. Her gaze stayed at Yutaro and Daki. Not unlike yours. Realization broke like the dawn. Oh, oh dear. You said had. Naruto forced himself to swallow. What happened to them? I fell ill. She didn't so much speak the words as she did sigh, stricken with an awful disease, and began seeking a cure. Muzan found me and offered a cure. Naive, I accepted and became a monster. Her gaze pinned him, a demon. And do you know what I did? Naruto bit his lip to stifle an angry oath. He'd seen newborn demons before, created more than a few in his day. It took nearly a full year for his to properly control their hunger and power, during which they had to watch at all times. They had to be watched at all times, lest they hurt someone or themselves. Taki and Yutaro were the exception to the rule. Both had been near death when he turned them. Perhaps that affected their appetite. Somehow, he doubted Muzan cared as much for those he desired. You went on a rampage, didn't you? A nod, slow and grave. I did. Those ones lively like ice fell, gazing at her empty hands. I killed them. She wept, staring at her hands. My husband, my children, all dead. She hugged her arms close to her chest, took a deep breath to steady herself, then barreled on. And so many others. Once I learned the truth, I raged against them. I fought. I lost. I fell into despair. I didn't find hope again until much later. She looked like she would say yet more, but cut herself off. That is who Muzan Kibutsuji is. That is why I want his head. Do you understand now? Daki Yuzuru. Naruto raised a hand, forestalling the argument he knew was coming. Don't insult Tamayo anymore. The former balked but complied. Fine. How can I be angry with her after that? If you still doubt me. Tamayo fell silent for a long moment, then her right hand rose and tugged back her collar, exposing the pale expanse of a slender neck, with the other reach up, while the other reached up and pulled the paint from the hair, freeing from its spun, an ebony curtain cascaded down her back. It made her look years younger. Despite himself, Naruto felt his pulse quicken. Turn me, then, she said, arching her head back. Make me yours. Bind my faith to yours own. Let that be proof of my faith. The hairpin she cast aside, sending it clattering into a corner. I offer all my medical knowledge to you and yours. If the slayers come for you, they will come for me as well. If you die, I die. Silence stretched into oblivion. Someone whistled, a low, sharp sound pervading the room. It took Naruto a moment to understand from whence the sound came. Not from Gyutaro or Taki, who was currently gnawing her teeth and looking fit to burst, but from someone entirely unexpected. It came from him. Bold of her, Kurama uttered a jaw-popping yawn. I'll give her that. Well, what are you gonna do? She could be a useful ally. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to infiltrate his ranks. No matter how sincere she might be, her presence still carried an inherent risk, one he wasn't sure he was willing to take. Tamayo would go after Muzan, with or without him. That much wasn't in question. He would understand why now, but it didn't change the fact. You got guts asking me to take you outright, he said, choosing the words with great care. But I don't see how making family will help us. She stilled. I beg your pardon. She said it. You said it yourself. He held up a finger to forestall another argument. Muzan is hunting you. If I take you in, it would paint yet another target on my back. If it were just him, he wouldn't care. But he had lives to look after, followers to guide, and families to protect. It befits you, certainly, but also hinders me in the long run. Tamaya tugged her collar back yet further, exposing the swell of her bosom, heavily wrapped and bound back by a breastband. Would you rather I offer my body to you? Lucky lunged forward. Gyutaro caught and reeled her back, arms locking around her mouth and waist. Heat crept up the back of his neck, despite his best efforts. Why did your mind go there? No, she tugged her clothes back. Then you truly are a noble man. Naruto palmed his face with a sigh. It ain't a matter of ingesting my blood. You need my will. That is to say, my permission to become one of mine. Even then, it's a coin toss. Some aren't strong enough to survive it. I've seen demons stronger than you die, writhing in pain, begging for mercy. Is that what you want? Good sir. A dark brow arched as her eyes went slitted again, the faintest smile touching her lips. I do hope you're not implying that I'm weak. Not at all. He waved a hand, mildly amused by her fire. But if I make you a family, you'd go straight for him. What happens if you fail? Her hands fell. The faintest flick of a scowl touched her pale face. Do you not intend to pursue him? Are you afraid of him? Did she really think that? It was too much. He just couldn't help himself. Naruto threw his head back and laughed. Susamaru looked up from her book. Aw, it feels like I'm missing out on something good. No matter, she'd corner the young master when he came back. Tamara had never been so heartedly ridiculed in her entire life. Even during her terrible tenure as Musan's servant, no one had laughed at her like this. Because, make no mistake, she was being laughed at. It was the worst sort. It was the worst sort of mockery. It burned in her blood and boiled her soul. And still, Naruto continued to cackle. He slapped at his knees as he doubled over, shoulders shaking from mirth. His attendant looked as startled as she felt. It was cruel or kind. It was cruel or kind, but rather something in between, baffling, infuriating. Will you please stop? Sorry, he rattled off with a hoarse cackle, wiping a mirthful tear from the corner of his left eye. Didn't mean to laugh at you like that. It's just another snigger escaped him. I can't help myself. You honestly think I'm going to leave Muzan alone? Me? You aren't? No. Naruto shook his head side to side, blonde bangs swaying with the motion. No, no, no. Not a chance in hell. He finally raised his gaze then, and what Tamayo saw there struck the words from her tongue as sure as a strong storm. Dangerous, that was her first thought. Naruto was still smiling, but it no longer reached his eyes, or indeed any other part of his face. Planting his chin on a finger at his fist, he regarded her identity, her entirety, eyes burning in his like twin coals in his skull. He crooked a finger at her. In that moment, he looked less like some peasant pauper and more a king reclining upon some unseen throne. His presence loomed large, threatening to strangle her where she sat. Her heart hammered in her chest, beating a mile a minute. Come here. It was not a request. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Some eldritch force compelled Tamayo to lean in and listen. I'm going to destroy Muzan, body and soul. His lips brushed the outer lobe of her ear. Mind and spirit. She felt the subtle curve of his lips curling in a scowl. Then I'm going to feed him to my family. We'll see how high and mighty your so-called demon king is then. No allies to back him up, no means to escape, only slow, agonizing death. He laughed and the spell broke, leaving her to recoil. It'll be a sight to see. Knight thumbed his chin and looked upward, imagining it. No matter what he says, what he does, what he summons, I am going to kill him. Eventually, he discussed the concept of violence so casually, and every word rang true, and it was then that she understood. For all his smiles and jest, this man held power. He could be cold as ice or warm as fire. She'd just gotten a glimpse of both sides. It terrified her, fascinated her. Just what was he? From what you said of him thus far, it doesn't sound like he's aware of me. Yet, Naruto poured her a glass of tea, and she found herself accepting it. Wait, when had the roles been reversed? Raising it to her lips. Now as he prattled on. That gives us options, I suppose. Her heart skipped a beat. Us, not me. Was that good? She took a moment to ponder it. Had Musan made a move against Naruto, the world would be afire. Demon would fight demon in the streets. Innocents would die by the dozens. No, hundreds. The Slayers wouldn't be able to conceal that kind of carnage. The existence of demons would surely be revealed, and everything would plunge into chaos. Japan might even plunge back into the Dark Ages. An even less pleasant notion struck her then. What if Naruto worked with Muzan? They were both immensely powerful, and Muzan was terribly charismatic. If they ever met, he may well sway him to his side. No, absolutely not. Her mind ran with the image, envisioning a world in which demons ruled, where humans were so much livestock to be fed upon at their leisure. The Slayer corpse would be annihilated, and all knowledge of slaying demons with them. People people would live in fear, ever dreading their demise, never knowing which day would be the last. The thought made her very soul tremble. As things stand, we'll have a war on our hands sooner or later. Naruto drummed his finger against the table, pounding out a steady rhythm. If I were him, I'd be mustering my forces, even if he isn't aware of me just yet. I've been tearing through his demons like paper. That's bound to put him on edge. You sound confident of your victory. I am, two little words, and not a grain of deceit in them. Unlike him, I've not been idle with the time given to me. I've got friends all over Japan. Shouldn't be too hard to pull a few strings. He mimed the motion of a puppeteer, winging his fingers at her. After all, it's such a nice thing to have friends in high places. Her blood ran cold again. Just how high? High enough. His smile was all teeth. That's all you need to know. Did he have demons in the government of Japan? Spies in the Slayers, perhaps? She had no way of knowing. This man was the antithesis of Muzan in every way. He cared not for immortality, the blue spider lily, any of it. His only focus was his family, and unlike that vicious little parasite, he appeared to have utilized his allies in a far more subtle capacity. Demons capable of walking in the sunlight would be utterly indistinguishable from humans who knew what purpose they might yet serve. You'd kill them all, only those who won't listen to reason. He shook his head. Sorry, but I'm done looking back. I'm shaking the past off. I'll prove myself by surviving. I'll prove that it's better this way. I'll prove that I'm not crazy. No matter how much humanity rejects me with their words, their deeds, their thoughts, I won't bend. No matter what they think, no matter how they threaten me, I'm not gonna falter. I'm not gonna shrink away in fear. I will persist. I will endure. That's what it means to live. An aspiring speech. He had actually made her heart skip a beat there. Wasn't trying to be. Demon or human, at the end of the day, we're all alive, you know? She leaned back, realizing the gravity of his words. Do you see what I'm saying now? He laughed and patted Daki on the head, drawing a police thumb from his ward. I don't care how well Muzan thinks he can hide. I'll find him sooner or later, with or without the corpse and their assistance. Before her eyes, he held her and Yutaro close. I will not part with a single member of my family. None of them will fall to the Slayer blades. Do you understand? She did, in a sense. Family was everything to him, just as hers had been. Which is why his sudden exclamation startled her. You'd best not make me regret this. Before she could think to ask what he was on about, Naruto pulled away from his children, raised a thumb to his lips, and bit down hard. Blood ran freely from the digit. He cupped it in his hand and bent them over to the earthen cup he drained only a few moments before, filling it to the brim. Tamaya looked on, fascinated and frankly more than a little nervous. Now that the opportunity was before her, she found herself hesitating at last. In truth, she would have much rather preferred to run tests on Naruto's blood first, but somehow she doubted he would allow such. Not yet, not when there was still so little trust between them. The idea of becoming human again was suddenly a dim and distant prospect indeed. She couldn't best Muzana as a human, and certainly not as she was now. Kids, Naruto craned his neck back. What do you think? Yuzuru shrugged. I say go for it. No point doing things by half measures now. Can't leave her like this either. Don't look at me. Daki folded both arms before her bosom and looked away with a sulk. You're gonna do it with or without my approval? Naruto fixed her with a flat stare. Do you really think so little of me? As Tamara looked on, the younger girl wavered, and then, all right, fine. Now listen here. She whirled and jabbed a finger at her. You're lower on the pecking order than me and Mukako. You got that? A faint smile touched her lips. I understand. You'd better. All right, then it's decided. Nato held the cup out to her. I'll warn you, if you drink this, or your hunger will most likely come roaring back. His voice simmered with promise, dark and dire. Becoming a true demon burns away every bit of the old. I found you'll be stronger and faster than before too. She perked up, her inner doctor rising to the fore. By how much? Oh, Naruto hummed, warming to her line of questions. Curious, aren't we? I am a doctor, after all, came her rejoinder. It would be remiss of me not to ask. Your self control's gonna be short in the beginning. For that first year, you won't be going anywhere without a minder. Her lips thinned at that, but it was a concession she was willing to make. If you clutch yourself on innocence, we'll put you down. If you manage to keep a hold of your senses after that, then you'll have a permanent place with us. A year of probation then, with with a chance to extend the terms indefinitely. And trembling hands cradled the ceramic. I've endured worse before. Bottoms up then. Tamayo didn't back down from the challenge. She absolutely did not dare. Half-lidded eyes locked on Naruto. She raised the glass to her lips and drank to the last drop. Her hands spasmed. The cup fell from her fingers and crashed to the floor, splitting clean down the middle. A sweet was her first thought. Wait, why was the room spinning? Tamaya touched a hand to her head as the room began to spin. I feel strange. You didn't mention this. That's normal. Naruto hummed, a voice echoing oddly. You're not coughing either. He thumbed his chin and nodded. That's usually a bad sign. Tamayo's world tilted on its head, and hers hit the ground. Her thoughts grew fuzzy. Had she fallen? How silly of her! A faint ringing rose in her ears. Why couldn't she move? Someone was giggling. Was it her? It sounded like her. She raised a hand and saw the veins pulsing there. Felt his blood mingling with hers to make her something more. An almost pleasant heat crawled through her veins, sufficing her every cell. It suffocating her every cell. It felt like she was melting away in a hot bath. There was no danger, and she yielded to it with a pleasant sigh. Well, she heard Naruto rumble as her vision continued to blur. That's new. No pain for her at all. Seems she'll be fine. Drunk. She was drunk. She felt drunk. Her thoughts were becoming increasingly muddled. Tamayo's world was still spinning when someone else appeared. How curious. Why were there two Narutos all of a sudden? The second of them looked towards the original. You've got trouble, boss. You die today, demon. Mukago squeaked and scampered. I'm never going out for supplies again. Coward! The Hashira shouted at her, rapidly retreating back. Stand and fight! Nope, nope, all the nope. I don't think so. She who runs away lives to fight another day. She was still running when she felt a sharp and sudden tug on her thoughts. It was a feeling she knew all too well. A message from the young master. Make a portal to him. She groaned a little to herself, then gulped. Oh, that can't be good. She cut a crimson tear in the air with a blood art and hopped into it, leaving a baffled Hashira behind. What did I just witness? The Slayers had found Tamayo's home. In hindsight, Naruto was almost disappointed with himself. He'd gotten distracted, rusty. He'd been enjoying himself too much. His attention focused solely upon Tamayo, to the exclusion of all else, so much so that he'd failed to notice the threat creeping closer to her door. It was downright shameful, really. Thankfully, he'd left a clone behind to watch the matter, but still, this was embarrassing. Talking Yutaro would never let him live this down. If he hadn't left them behind to watch over Tamayo, they'd be laughing their asses off right about now. Can't blame you. Sounded like you were enjoying yourself. And he had. Now sleepy scarlet slit swept over the band of seven swordsmen, now stalking towards him. Huh. If that wasn't a tongue twister, he didn't know what was. Was this a rogue band of hunters? Unlikely. Chances were they'd been stationed in this area for quite some time, trying to track Tomoyo down. Then he'd come barging in without a second's thought. Small wonder they'd noticed. They might not even know it was Tomoyo they were hunting. That answered one of his questions. At least, if Tomoyo was properly allied with them, they wouldn't have sought her out like this. Perhaps they would be proper allies in time, but not yet. Slayers hunting demons where they found them. Consequences be damned. She might even be on good terms with some of them, but not all. Well, he cracked his neck. Seven, huh? I don't know if I should be amused or insulted. The former. This isn't even a warm up for us, and you know it. If there's a Hashira here, I can't tell. He was right. On that account alone, their gaze raked over the unlikely band, taking them each in turn. Hashira were difficult to detect at the best of times, but the others weren't. And what were these rookies? Arrogant souls looking to make a name for themselves by cutting down a helpless demon. Now he felt a little insulted. Plotting himself down on the porch, he tugged a gourd of sake from his belt, bound by a warm cork. Tearing the stopper free with his teeth, he spat it out and drank deeply. It burned all the way down. In good brew is Shuten's best. A single sip was enough to kill a mortal man. For demons, it was damn good sake. Already, he could feel all his anger and stress burning away, replaced by a pleasant, tipsy euphoria. Gotta marry her someday, he thought to himself. She really does make the best stuff. Evening, gentlemen. Still grinning, he hallooed at the seven swordsmen. What can I do for you on this fine night? They paused, unaccustomed to such a greeting. One stepped forth. Their leader was a grizzled veteran, his dark hair streaking with grey, his worn visage heavily scattered, but scarred by time and battle alike. A dark eye patch dominated the right side of his discolored face, hinting at even more grisly scars lurking beneath. No rookie, this a warrior stood before him, but for all that he held himself well, moving with purpose and poise, he made no move to draw his blade. Indeed, he approached boldly, pausing only a stone's throw away. You can tell us where your comrades are. His voice was low. Do so, and I shall grant you a swift death. Naruto tutted softly. Counter offer, leave, and I'll spare your lives. We do not, we do not, we do not trust, we do not truck with demons. Pity, pity, pity. Such a pity. He'd earned points for style, but not so much point, but so many points lost for stupidity. The wind turned then, and blowing the Slayer sent towards him, he inhaled reflexively, realizing the faded amber coat and the man wore was not a coat at all. He stank of blood while his in turn sang, Hashira. Kurama perked up. Not a young one at that. Wonder which style he uses. Die, you say? He took another long drink, gasping as it burned his blood. You're not the first Hashira to say that to me. No, there have been so many. Setting the gourd down, he planted both hands upon it and leaned forward, fangs flashing. And you have to ask yourself, what happened to them? Those behind the Hashira wavered, even if the man before him did not. I tried to spare them, not about his head. But they never listened to me, not one. Rather than retreat, the Hashira reached over his back, drawing a single massive sword. It was a large, looming thing, amber in the moonlight, nearly as large as he was tall. Near the hilt, a single line of kanji lay sprawled across the surface of that cold steel. It was a phrase he knew all too well. Destroyer of demons. Which are you, then? Naruto smacked his lips. Flame, wind, stone. I am the blade Hashira, came the simple retort. I am your end, nothing more. Blade, that's a new one. It's such a stick in the mud. This one, not fun at all. No name for me. You won't live to remember it. He pursed his lips. Humor me, if you insist. The aging Hashira retorted. Yasuhashi Daichi. That towering broadswordsman swept down, planting itself in the soil with an ominous clang. Will you stand and fight, or must I come to you? It was going to come to violence then. He just knew it. The doctor in him made one final overture of peace, soft and quiet. Last chance, he pleaded. You're hunting the wrong quarry. Me and mine have done no harm. A pause, and then, I do not believe that. I can no longer believe all demons must die. Naruto felt his shoulders slump. Don't make me do it. Please don't push me, he said as much. I don't want to be the bad guy. The Slayer shifted restlessly. See this bottle? He held the young gourd out, liquid sloshing within. Think of this drink as your blood, and spill it at your own peril. Daichi swept forward and slashed it, splattering his chest and ruining his coat. Naruto looked down, sighed, blew out a sharp, angry breath. It was always the old ones. They never learned. An ember of anger sparked to life in his chest. He exhaled slowly, releasing a thin plume of steam into the night. That was perfectly good sake you just wasted. Yatsuhashi brought his Nichirin blade around with a cry, sweeping at his neck. It never arrived. Clawed fingers caught its naked edge, holding it at bay as surely as a stick. His hand bit down, spiderweb fractures bleeding across the steel from the point of work. He sought to retreat, tried to point of contact. The Hashira balked and tried to push through to Novel. When that didn't work, he sought to retreat, tried to back down, and tried to draw back. All in vain. He could have released his sword at any time, but without it, he had no means of slaying him, so he did what any slayer would do in his place. Blade breathing, first form. A fish shot into his throat, shattering his larynx before he could inhale properly. You gave me your name, now I'll give you mine. He raised his gaze, glaring at the now choking man before him. I am Naruto Uzumaki, son of Minato and Kushina, and I have had enough. An open palm shot out, cradling a Rasen shuriken within, and chakra met flesh. Yatsuhashi evaporated in a fine bloody mist. All of this, he whirled on the remaining slayers, causing them to shrink back. All of you, none of you ever listen. I'm sick of it. As one unit, they panicked and drew their weapons. As one, four more died, falling to bloody pieces at his feet. A fifth survived through sheer bloody luck. Being near the back, they tripped and fell, their blade trembled in his hands, eyes wide as they gazed up their ruined comrades. They hadn't seen him move. Of course not. They were only human, after all, young too, barely 14 by the look of them. As the sixth, a woman rushed in with blade drawn. Die, demon! Red eyes rolled, so did the Slayer's head. It struck the ground and bounced once. Naruto turned towards the sole survivor, red eyes blazing in the gloom. Think it through. His words must have shaken the surviving slayer, because they stumbled back. Their anger, their sword fell from their hands. It cracked harshly in the road. He could see the anger in their eyes, the hate, but also the fear, the cruel realization that they too would die just as needlessly if they fought. And they would if they picked up that sword. He disliked killing, but he would for his family. Remarkably, they listened. Good. Finally, someone with some sense. It threatened him to seem such. He liked the ones who actually stopped to think. I can see you're the smart one. He stood, but he stood, bit his thumb to make it bleed, and strode forward, letting a bead of red run down his hand. I've got a proposition for you. He crouched down before them. But first, what's your name? Bright eyes met his. Mihari, Naruto tilted his head. Hmm, that's not an Easter name, is it? No. She shook her head, and tears pouring down her face. My father is from the West. She buried her head in the mud, terrified to look at him. Please, I don't want to die. His fingers twitched. She should kill him. He should kill her. It would be so very easy, just a flick of his wrist. And yet, would you like to be a demon? Her head snapped up. What? I mean, yes, if I'll live. Then this is what you will do. He told her in no uncertain terms what he expected of her. Minutes passed. By the end, she nodded fretfully, never once taking her dark eyes from his. Do you understand? Another nod. Now go. Another spy couldn't hurt. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. I want to watch you live a bit more. He took her by the shoulders, pulling the trembling girl to her feet. That's right. Run away. Cling to your life. Go back to your fellow slayers. Observe them. Watch them. Tell me of their movements. Let them know what will happen if they come for me again. And then, when you have fulfilled your purpose over the years, when you have learned all there is to know, come stand before me again. Mihari hiccuped, warbling a little, and he took pity on her. Do that, and I'll make you a demon. Sound fair? She knelt. Yes, my master. And that's the long and short of what happened. Naruto clapped his hands. Masami didn't look much pleased with him, neither did Sora nor Jiyu. Susumaru least of all, the crowd around him glaring bloody red daggers. Safe and secure though they were in his home once more, he could not help but feel a faint pang of dread. And why was Kurama laughing in the back of his head? So, Susumaru growled through grit teeth. You went and did all that without us, and picked up another girl. If Tamara weren't sleeping off her change, he suspected that she'd object most sternly to that. Instead, Naruto blinked thrice. Yes, why you looked at me like that? She absolutely hissed. What about me? I'm afraid I don't follow. Urgh, Suzumaru screamed at the ceiling. You're impossible. Do I have to spell it out for you? He scratched the back of his head. That would be nice, thank you. Urgh! Apparently, it was too much for her, because she dove on him and crushed her lips to his. He had an instinct to balk, and then she was driving him down, tackling him to the ground. Sheer momentum won the day, and she pitched back with a startled sound. She took the chance for what it was and latched on for dear life, squeezing him with all of her arms. There, she drew away, wiping her lips. Understand now? Someone cried out behind her. It sounded like the Spider Girls. No fair. Yeah, Lucky bulled in on that side and clutched onto his arm, trying to pull him away. Mine? Says who? Oi! Naruto groaned as he found himself tugged to and fro. I'm not something you can claim. You can and have. Mine. Susumaru swore. Why, you little hands off! Oh, by two! It was the pebble that started the avalanche. The Spider Sisters jumped on him and their mother with him. In no time at all, he found himself a cocooned in a tangled mess of bodies and voices. At least Mukago knew better than to jump into that dog pile, though not for lack of want. He reached out to her mentally and was rewarded with a flinch. Not gonna join them. Nope. Her mind brushed back against his. I'll just come back when you're all alone. Less chance of dying. He huffed at her from where he lay. You'd best. I've got questions for you about Muzan. Meep! She squeaked, having been caught out. Please be gentle. I'm hardly gonna hurt you. Go on, I'll see you tonight. She nodded and scarped. No, mate, no, he'd track her no matter. He'd track her down later. Sumaru had dipped lower and he swatted it away with a scowl. None of that. Aw. Naruto swabbed his lips and sprawled back with a patience born of eternity. Well, guess this is my life now. Long live the king. Previews. I want to be a doctor. The silent mansion did not answer her. Is anyone there? Her voice echoed in the lifeless halls, bounding off seemingly endless staircase. All the stories say the man who lives here has secret knowledge. The shadows held no such things for her. I want to learn too. She swallowed, stilling her fear before barreling on. To help people. None answered her. Was this place abandoned after all then? Had she come all this way for nothing? Stories, huh? Something stirred in the shadows behind her. She knew it, if only because there hadn't been anywhere there. There hadn't been anywhere there where when she'd entered the mansion. Her blood ran cold as she heard the faint sound of footsteps accompanied by the sweet sound of dulcet laughter. Of course they do. Someone's chin came down over her shoulder, and her peripherals, whiskered cheeks dimpled in a smile. I'm the one who first started those stories decades ago. And who are you? No fear. She remembered the stories. She mustn't show fear. You're him then? The doctor? Of a sort. She whirled, and he was no longer behind her. I heal people. His voice echoed in the dark all around her. Help them. Help themselves. When she turned back, he stood before her, smiling. And you? You still haven't told your name? She told him. His eyes widened. Not heard that one before. A king needs a queen, after all. You dare touch my blood without permission? Since we both, since we both heartedly, since we both heartedly ridiculed the Slayers, I'll allow it this once. There will not be a second time. Know your place, or it will be shown to you. A wife? She kissed him fiercely, mouth melding against his, her hands pushed up against his chest, tearing at his clothes. Even as his hand ran across her flank, she made a please sound and lifted her leg, allowing him to run a hand across her thigh. She lifted the other leg within his, holding him fast. Love me. It was a plea. I'm begging you. My name is Biken. I've come to slay you. Your kind took everything from me. A blonde brow rose. Biken, I don't even know who you are. You will. Her blade hissed free. Now stand and fight. His head tilted. Why should I? What do you mean, why? Don't make me kill you all. All right, Miranjo. Say, Daddy. 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 Naruto felt his heart twitch. Well, damn. She actually did it. In the background, Tamaya preened like the proud mother she was. Little Hashira, little men think they're doing the right thing. I'm not your enemy. Buzz off. Naruto exhaled slowly, exhaling a plume of steam. The next words that spilled from his lips came from so deep within his gut that it nearly made everything he'd ever said felt like a lie. He saw red. No, that wasn't quite right. His world was red. He stood slowly, lumbering to his feet, a puppet without strings. I'm going to kill you now. It won't be quick. It won't be painless. Don't don't hurt me. They don't understand. They don't know what they're doing. Be better than them, please. King, me? Do you see a crown on this head? I ain't king of anything. Run along now, little Hashira. I'm not in the mood. Or you can stay and die. Your choice. End of chapter 5.